Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Cabinet Vision Guy. In today's episode, we're going to continue our series on JavaScript and we're going to revisit our episode on variables, parameters and attributes. In the first video, we looked at JavaScript variables, and in this video, we're going to look at the Cabinet Vision parameters, attributes and notes as well. So the first thing to look at is what is a Cabinet Vision parameter, and I'm going to try and explain that without a UCS to start with, and I'm going to do that with our example job from the previous video. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to head into the object tree, and I'm going to select our two-door base, and I'm going to take a look at some of the parameters that are available for our assembly that we've got here. CV parameters are a lot like variables, except for they apply to an object. So we've got parameters applied to, for example, our wall, our room, and our assembly. We can apply custom parameters or user-created parameters, and we can also use system parameters that are automatically applied to parts and assemblies too. If you want more information on the system parameters that are automatically created by Cabinet Vision, just head into the help file and there is a section, and this breaks down every system parameter that exists in the system, what it does and also what it applies to as well, so really useful. Now, as I mentioned, we can also create user parameters in here as well, so if I just create a new parameter, you'll see that I can give this parameter a type, again, a lot like we can do with a variable, so we can have things like a measurement, degrees, an integer, bool, decimal, text and currency, and we can also set the style as well, and this is where attributes and notes come into play. And not wanting to spoil the surprise, but an attribute or a note essentially is a style of parameter that we can apply to different objects. So I'm going to set this to standard. So what I can do here is I can give it a parameter name, and I can also give it a value in here as well. Now, what I can do is I can also set this to be an equation. So if I want to add any intelligence to this, I can do, but I'm going to go with a fixed value and I'm just going to set this to be 5 for now and hit OK. And what I should be able to see is my parameter now exists in the object tree. I should have probably called it something different, but my parameter now exists. Obviously it's a measurement, so it's just set to 5. Now what I can do with a parameter, for example, is I can use it, or I can use multiple parameters to build intelligence. So for example, on this assembly, I might have a parameter that is set like this one to 5, and I might have another parameter that uses this value and times it by 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another parameter. I'm going to leave the type as measurement and the style as standard, and I'll give it a really simple name. And for this one, I'm going to use an equation, and I'm just going to put my parameter and hit test. And what it should do is it should return true and return an equation of 5. And basically what it's doing is it's looking up the value of this parameter here. And if I want to, like for example in this one, times it by 2, I can just put times 2, hit test, and I've got my result there. Now, as well as being able to apply these parameters manually like I've done here, we can also apply these with the UCS. And with a traditional UCS, these parameters are essentially what we'd be using within our UCS as variables. So when you've got a traditional UCS running, sometimes you can come into the object tree and see different parameters that are applied to the object that your UCS is running on. And some of those parameters you will want to see, and some of those parameters will be used internally by the UCS for its calculations. So let's head up to our example UCS and take a look at how we can add and manipulate parameters from here. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment certain sections of the UCS as we look at it. Up at the top here is where we've got episode 1, JavaScript variables, and down here is where we're going to be working today. And the first thing that we're going to look at today is how we go about setting a parameter. So I'm going to uncomment my first line, and the parameter that I've chosen is actually a system parameter. This is TOEH, and this sets the toe height on the assembly. So if I just have a look in the help file, you'll see this is under system parameters. And this parameter is a type, system and or user definable. So you'll notice on some of the system parameters, these are set to query only, so we can only read these parameters. But with this one, we can actually specify the plinth height of the assembly. So back in my UCS, to do this, what I need to do is use this .setParameter, and then I need to pass the parameter name, pass the parameter value, and I can also pass the parameter type as well if I need to set that too. Now, the reason why I've chosen this system parameter as our first parameter to set is it requires or is best used with an option called pre-build on our UCS. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to exit out of this and I'm going to take a look at my assembly. And as you'll see on the left hand side, I've got my parameter active. I know it's driven by a UCS because I've got this nice little icon on the left hand side. but what I don't see on my assembly is my plinth height set at 10 inches. And the reason for this is this system parameter and many system parameters that are applied to objects like assemblies are actually used in the build process for the assembly. So what I need to do to trigger this, I need to essentially cause a rebuild of the system, and I'm going to do that just by resizing the assembly. And as you'll see instantly, my plinth has now jumped up to being a 10-inch plinth. Now, if we are modifying or applying a system parameter that is used in the build process, what we can do is we can head up to our UCS and we can tick an option pre-build. So if I just move along here, you'll see the option pre-build is in here. So I'm going to enable that, and then I'm just going to head back to code and modify our UCS, and I'm just going to set this to being a 3-inch plinth. And what we should see is we should see that happen instantly. And again, this is because the parameter is now being applied pre-build. So before the assembly is built, we are deciding on the plinth height, and then during the build process, the plinth height is created. And I'm going to head back up and continue modifying my UCS. I'm going to disable pre-build for the rest of the episode. And again, the only times when I would use pre-build is if the parameter that we're applying is part of the cabinet build, or we don't have anything in the UCS that would force a rebuild automatically. So for example, if we had an attribute on the assembly on the left-hand side that allowed us to control the toe height, this would probably force a rebuild and allow us to not need the pre-build ticked in our UCS. So as well as being able to set a system parameter, we can also set user parameters as well. So I'm going to comment this line out, and I'm just going to uncomment this section here. So as you can see, this one's really simple. We've got this.set parameter. The parameter that we're passing is a text, and we're actually setting the parameter type here. There are several different parameters that we can create, much like when we're setting a parameter manually. We can set a measurement, a degrees, radians, integer, bool, decimal, part ID, text, and currency. And when we're getting and setting the type of parameter, it's quite important to make sure that that's consistent. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to set a parameter, say as a text value here, and then read that and build that into a conditional statement expecting an integer, for instance. So as well as being able to set a parameter, we can also remove a parameter. So I'm just going to show you what this looks like on cabinet level. So I'm expecting to see a parameter with the name my CV parameter and the value my text parameter value 1. And if I head to my assembly, you'll see my CV parameter, and if I double click on this, you'll see it's got a value of my text parameter value 1. Now, if I chose to disable my UCS at this point, the parameter that's applied to cabinet level would still exist. So any changes that we make to cabinet level tend to stay as an override. But if this UCS was acting on a part and I chose to disable this, the attribute itself would disappear. So let's head back up to our UCS, and I'll just show you what happens when we remove that parameter. So even though I've got it set here, I'm going to choose to do a this.remove parameter, and I'm going to again make sure I've got a correct parameter name up here. And if I hit OK, and just head to assembly level here, you'll see that no parameter exists now because we're actually adding it and then removing it straight after. So as well as being able to add and remove parameters, we can also read the value of the parameter. So I'm just going to head up to my UCS, and I'm going to comment out the section where we remove the parameter, obviously, and I'm going to add an alert in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this, and I'm going to use get parameter value. Make sure I spell it correctly. And obviously for this, we're going to use our parameter name. And what this should now do is it should now produce us an alert, and it should alert us with the value of this parameter here. And I'm glad I can spell today. That works, and obviously it gives us the prompt. And again, this is just reading the value of our parameter that we've now got applied down here, my CV parameter. And I'm just going to head back up to my UCS. Now, obviously, to produce this alert, what we've done is we've used this .get parameter value, which has read the value of our parameter that we're setting up here. But depending on what we're doing in our UCS, we might want to use a different method, and there are several methods that we should be aware of. We might be just wanting to check whether the parameter exists or not, in which case we'd use this .has parameter. We might be passing an equation to the parameter that we want it to evaluate, in which case we'd use this .evaluate. or we might want it to return a true or false based on a condition, in which case we'd pass it this.evaluateCondition. Each method has a slightly different effect, so it's really important to make sure when we're writing logic into our ECS, we're using the correct one in the correct place. Join me in part 3 when we're going to look at some of the best practices when it comes to reading and using some of the parameters, and we're also going to take a look at attributes and notes as well. Hopefully you've found this episode useful. Feel free to give us a like, share and subscribe. We're also on Facebook, that's facebook.com/thecabinetvisionguy, and Instagram too, that's instagram.com/thecabinetvisionguy. Cheers!